Hey YouTubers, in this video we will try to put our cat into Windows. If you are a Linux user, you might know this command cat, which basically prints out the contents of your file to to your console. So before we get started, I would like to mention that I have a file in my desktop called sample.txt, which has only two lines of text, hello world, and this is a sample file. So before we start programming, I'll show you how this cat command works and how this works and how to use this. So I'll type cat and I'll pass in the file name. In our case, it is sample.txt. So if I pass in, it would just print the contents of the file to your console. As you can see, it just printed it out. So to program this, to build the cat command, I'll be using C language. And I'll be using Vim as my editor. You can use any editor you want. You can use a Sublime Text or VS Code or any editor of your choice, but I'll be using Vim. I'll type in Vim and I'll open a new file called cat.c. I'll just say recover. Okay, now we can start programming. So what we basically need to do is that we need to check for a command line argument which is being passed in and open the file and print the contents of the file to our console. So the only library which we'll be using for this build is the standard.io library. So I'll just go ahead and I'll import the standard.io library. I have the standard.io library imported. So if you know how C is working, you need a main function. So I'll create a main function. Now we need to figure out how we can get command line argument from the user. To get a command line argument, you just need to replace this void with an argument counter and an argument vector. So basically what this argument counter does is that it just keeps track of how many arguments are passed. It's an integer type, and this argument vector keeps track of what the argument was passed in. If you say cat and the file name, the argument vector will store what was passed in. Like it will store cat and the argument name and the file name. The argument counter will keep track of how many number of arguments are passed. So we'll say int and argc argument counter and let me spell it to correct, argument vector, which is basically a pointer to a string, and it needs to be of an array. Okay, now we have got a command line argument from the user. Now we need to check whether the user has cooperated by giving the proper amount of argument counter. If he gives like 10 argument counter, that's not a valid one. The valid one must be 2, the file name and the executable name. So we just need to check if argument counter is 2. If it is not 2, we need to return 1 and say it was an usage error. So I'll say if argc is not equal to 2, print usage error and return 1 saying that it was an error. Okay, now we have checked whether the user has cooperated. Now let's go and open up the file. So basically how you open a file and see is that you create a data type, you create a variable of type file which is a pointer to the file which you are going to open. I know that might sound confusing at first, but if you practice it, everything will get easy. I'll just say f open and argv the first element of the array, and we'll open it in read mode. The only thing we're going to do is read the file, so I'll open it in read mode. And now we need to do one more check. If the user inputted a file which doesn't exist at all, we need to return that it was an error. There's no file that exists with the name which you have passed in. So we need to see if the file if the data is of type null. If it is equal to null, then there's no file which the user has passed in. So I'll just say if data equals null, we'll just say no such file. and return 1 indicating that it was an error. Oh, I missed the double quote there. That could have caused a lot of problem. Okay, now that's it. There's no more checking. Now we can read the file. So I'll create a variable, character variable called input, and I'll initialize to nothing. I'll create a while loop. Now only now I'm going to read it from the file. So what I'll do is I'll say that input is equal to getC, and I'll pass in the file name. This might look quite intimidating, but what I'm basically doing is that I'm initializing the input variable to a single character. What this getC command does is that it reads the file character by single character by character and returns a character. I'm storing that character in my input. So that is what this line says here. And the other thing I'm doing here is that I'm checking if input is not equal to EOF. What this EOF stands is for end of the file. If it is the end of the file, this input will be equal to EOF. I am checking that it is not the end of the file. If it is not the end of file, I can just print the input. Print the input, and that's it. There's one last thing. I need to close the file which I opened it. If you are not closing the file, that could cause some errors and it can make your program crash. So it's a good idea to close the file which you are opening. So I'll just close it. Close, and I'll pass in the file name, which in our case it is data. And that's it. And that's the program for cat. And we'll try to compile it. I'll use GCC compiler. Let's just wait for a moment. And it got compiled successfully. Let's test whether it's working properly. There's a file created here called a.exe, and that's our executable file. We need to run that file. I'll just say a.exe, and to see if it's working properly, I'll not be passing any file name. So it should throw an error saying that usage error. See, it just printed usage error. Now let's see. Now I'll give a file that doesn't exist at all. This file doesn't exist at all. I'll say no such file. So everything is working properly. Let's now try to give a valid file name sample.txt. And voila, it's working. It's printing the content of a file to your console. And now I have another file called thumbnail, which is going to be the thumbnail of my video. I will try to print the contents of that file. Okay, looks like it was not of the coding UTF-8 bytes, so just print it out randomly, I guess. We need to pass in a file with UTF-8 bytes, and only then it would work. So it's working finally, and this is how a cat command works. Even if you are in Linux and if you try to print the contents of an image, you will get the same thing, because the image is not of the type UTF-8 bytes, so you'll get the same thing. Okay, now it is working. But if I change my directory, there's a directory called programming in my desktop. If I change my directory and if I try to use this command a.exe, it will just say there's no file called a.exe. So what you need to do is that you need to put it in a place which is in your path. What I mean by that is that you need to create a folder and you need to add it to your path. If you don't know how to add it to your path, watch my first video in downloading Python, where I actually say how to create an environment variable. So in this video I'm not going to create an environment variable. I'll just put it in my C folder, in my Windows folder, and before putting it I'll just rename it as cat. Okay, now I have renamed it. In my search bar I'll search for this command called ipconfig. If you don't know what ipconfig is, that if you try to run ipconfig in your console, it would just print out the information about your Wi-Fi card, your IP address and everything. So I'll just put it via my IP config list, and that's added to my path. I just know that. So I'll just put it to my IP config folder. I'll just say open file location. And as you can see, it is in my C folder, and it is inside the Windows folder. So if you need to put something inside this, you need administrator permission, and I'll put this in and it'll ask for administration permission. I already have this file, so I need to replace it, but if you are putting it for the first time, you need to give administrator permission. See, it's asking for administrator permission. I will give continue. I'll close this folder, and to show you it's working, I'll remove this file cat.c, and I'll open up a new console, CMD. I'll change my directory to desktop, and now if I try to use the cat command on our sample text, it is working. This is how we create a cat command using C. And that's it for this video. If you like this video, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned till my next video, and in my next video I'll show you how to create the CP command. And thank you for watching.